Hello and welcome to another edition of For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. My guests today are from the Newport Substance Abuse Prevention Task Force. First up is Ben Elcom. He's been here before. He's a coordinator for a different reason. So first of all, let me welcome you back to the show.
Thanks for having me back.
But you were here in a different capacity before, correct? So let's talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So in the sort of field of prevention, we often look at many problems from different places. So different coalitions, different grants, but the work is very similar. So when we're trying to prevent a problem, we're trying to make a healthy community. Earlier, when I came to the show, we were talking about domestic violence and men's roles in domestic violence and helping to solve that problem. But today we're talking about substance abuse, and often sort of those two categories sometimes cross over with each other.
Right. There could be a time where you can come on where there's a third topic, a third subject that you may end up talking about, right?
True.
As long as there's something related. Yeah, prevention.
Yeah. And prevention covers a lot of different topics.
Well, let's talk what is the mission of the Newport Substance Abuse Prevention Task Force? What is the mantra or the mission?
Sure, absolutely. So the task force is a community organization, all volunteer except for myself. We work off a state grant that pays us to work with middle school and high school students around issues of substance abuse. So we are part of the city of Newport, but we're not voted in. So we're called a board of the city. And what we do is we work with the school system and after-school supports like the Boys and Girls Club or the YMCA, and we look at coordinating efforts of substance abuse prevention for those populations of kids. Because as we know, they move around a lot. They're in a lot of different sports and activities. Our goal is really looking at how do we coordinate all those activities so that the safety net that our kids live inside of that keeps them safe and makes them have healthy decisions really is as strong and as supported as we can make it.
Now, when you say coordinate, do you mean with the schools, with the parents? Is it all one kind of mesh together? It seems like it would have to be, right?
It really does. Because when we talk about prevention, it can't just be an intervention or a class that we run inside of a school system. It has to be where that class in the school system is mimicked in the youth groups and church groups that same student attends.
Wherever they are.
Comes in. Yeah, exactly. Where they are. It's in their home, it's in their school, it's in their livelihood. And it's not this overwhelming just say no campaign. It's about leadership. It's about making healthy decisions. It's really about opening it up beyond just a sort of tagline that we often have had in the past.
What you want them to do is to, listen to you during the week at some point when you're having a discussion. When the weekend comes, you want it to kind of pop into their head when they're out with their friends and when things can happen, you have that be a reminder to them.
Exactly.
Right? Make a choice.
Yeah. And when we look at it, if we're just in the school and we're telling them inside of this school classroom, you have to just say no. Then when they're in a school classroom, it's really easy for them to make that decision because they've been trained. They understand the logistics of it. Their peers understand it. But if we want them to say the same thing outside of that classroom, we need to be outside of that classroom too, having that same conversation. And that's where that community coalition, where we really get together and work as a community and as a team to really bring that message outside of schools or outside of individual youth groups.
And that's really what prevention is, isn't it? It's not just one class. It's not saying don't do this, don't do that. It's almost like, when you want to lose weight or go on a diet. You don't diet. It needs to be a lifestyle change, and I would imagine this as
Exactly. When you use that reference of dieting, is if you go on a crash diet, you'll lose a bunch of weight right then and there. But when you fall back into those old habits, that weight comes back on. So the idea of prevention is really making that lifestyle change. So we might be able to get a student to not or set off the onset of drug use from 7th to 8th grade. But if we want that to carry on to his adult life, then we really need to make that prevention be strong as we can get it to be.
Is that where you start as far as the age group goes, like 7th, 8th grade? Does it go younger, a little bit older?
So all of our work is dependent on grants,
right?
So when we look at our grants, mostly they focus on the high school level. Those conversations seem to be a little bit easier with parents and administration at that level. But we know that the effects of substance abuse is also happening in our middle school. So we spend a lot of time making sure that when those students move to the high school, they've already heard a lot of it, they've already felt a lot of that prevention, even if what we can pay for only happens in the high school.
Is the effect of substance abuse, when you're talking about that middle school area, is it not necessarily the child him or herself, but maybe something going on in the household, family, parents, that kind of thing?
It often can be, but we're seeing drug rates increase inside of middle school also.
Well, then let me ask you a question. What is the state of our youth these days, in your opinion, from your point of view and the work that you're doing?
Sure, sure. I can speak about that sort of at a broad level,
Yeah.
and I can speak better about what's happening inside of Newport. But to keep it on a very broad sense, we're seeing the whole sort of dynamics and also the social norms, as we call them, really changing around drug abuse. When we look at what's happening around medical marijuana, when we look about the different drugs, synthetic drugs and opiates, and what's happening around potpourri, all of these other drugs that are coming into our youth world, it's very different than when we were growing up.
It really
when
is.
drugs were really a lot simpler,
Right.
not in their social context, not in saying no, it was easier, but just in that there was less of it, and there was
also,
less of a market.
Was there also more of a stigma back then, too, than there is now? It's almost more accepted now?
Yeah, every generation it seems that acceptance of drug use or substance use really does drop. Sort of those social restraints from using seem to drop. But we still know that all our parents care about their kids getting successfully through school. We still know that our organizations still care about having strong, healthy communities. But it gets a little bit harder every year.
Yeah. So specifically Newport now, if you want to kind of glean it
Sure.
down a little bit more.
Yeah, we were able to run a needs assessment with help of the school and other systems to really look at what's happening inside of Newport, mainly in the teens. And we see that the drug use is pretty high. We're seeing that around 40 to 60%, depending on what drug it is, from pills to marijuana to alcohol, is usually a usage rate. And we measure that over the last 30 days. So the teens will answer a survey talking about, in the last 30 days, how many times have you used said drug? And we're seeing that with alcohol, it's up to 60% of our teens have used in the last 30 days.
Wow. Is there are there new ways where they're actually getting it, acquiring it, or is it the same old story, or how creative are they getting nowadays?
Well, we all know that all of our children are really creative.
And smart.
And
Yeah.
smart. And their world, their sort of way of getting around laws and rules, ours is getting a little more trickier. But when it comes to alcohol, it's usually those same old ways of being able to get through a friend or through a supervised or unsupervised party, where we really see that a lot of parents and a lot of older siblings see it as a rite of passage still, where if you're 17, 18 years old and it's still illegal for you to be drinking alcohol, well, that's just what boys do. It's part of that lifestyle. And really, that we've made slight changes to. We see that social norm of boys will be boys beginning to change, but we're still doing a lot of work around how do we get parents and older siblings to really understand the impact of substance use at a young age.
You know, and older siblings and parents, that's one thing, and that's certainly important. But it also ties into not just you speaking to kids in a class or having them. It's more of the talk about the community at large, their involvement in it, because not only will that make your job easier and make the lifestyle of the kids better, but I mean, you need to do that. You can't be just you saying, like you said, don't do drugs, don't drink.
Yeah. So it's definitely complicated. When you're talking about communities, you're talking about so many different levels or strata of culture, of levels of income, of where people live, of backgrounds and histories that really make it complicated. But we can look at sort of the results that have come from the smoke out campaigns, especially around Massachusetts, where a lot of it started, and seeing that there's been a lot of really great work done about changing that social stigma around smoking, where it's out of our bars, out of our restaurants, it's 100 yards away from entrances, we don't see it in workplaces. I mean, we used to smoke in doctors' offices.
Yeah, restaurants, everything, yeah.
We don't see that anymore.
No.
So when that worked, it really shows that there's social evidence to that we can make that same change around other substances. So it works at a community level, but you really have to understand the dynamics of that community to make it effective programming. And it just takes time and effort, and that's what we're working on in Newport right now.
If you want to be where the kids are, aside from, going to school, are you where they are in terms of, like, for example, social networks and things of that sort? I know you have the website you can give out, but are you where they are in terms of when they're online and maybe the music that they're listening to, the movies they're watching, TV, anything?
Sure, absolutely. We sort of do that in two parts, and it's an interesting sort of conversation because if I show up as a 35-year-old white guy and I walk into a kid's party and I start preaching the idea of not drinking,
You're like, whose dad is that? You know?
exactly, they're not going to hear me, and they're really used to adults coming to them saying what they shouldn't be doing. What we try to work with is bringing youth voices out of the community and having them become spokespersons for what that concept is. So where they're talking about the fact that they're not drinking, that they're looking towards the future, that they're trying to have a bigger impact on their community than this sort of social idea of going out and drinking. And that's really effective. And we see different programs throughout the state of Rhode Island that are doing some of that work. We're trying to do more of it, where we really encourage youth that are substance-free to have a bigger voice in the community. We also have to have a presence in social media, have to have a presence in the media,
You have to, if that's
in the
where they
town,
are.
in the school. I'm there having those conversations, but to make the impact, we're trying to get them to have those conversations.
You know, it's one thing you can have a sort of a celebrity youth be sort of a spokesperson, and then unfortunately the flip side is you'll see, and you know exactly what I'm saying,
Yeah.
you see celebrities just doing very bad things, and that certainly doesn't paint a very positive picture, you know?
It's tough. When you
Yeah.
pick a spokesperson, you really have to vet who that person is. And as we all know, we all have hard times. We all struggle with things. And when you're in the public persona, when everyone sees every struggle you have, sometimes it works against what you're trying to create. So we really look at sort of building a group of youth. So where we bring up Youth to Youth, which is a social organization in Newport that sort of works with teens that are substance free, or SAD and MAD programming that we've had in schools for a while, to really promote a group or a voice that doesn't have to just be targeted on one student, because every now and then we make a bad choice.
Talk to me about the role of the coordinator for Newport Substance Abuse Prevention Task Force. What are your day-to-day duties? What's it all about?
Sure. So the day-to-day duties of the coordinator is a lot of paperwork. We spend time in the office making sure that our grants are processing, that we're counting numbers, that budgets are on track. But we also spend a lot of time in the community to make sure that we are speaking to everyone, so that all the voices from the different strata of our community is being heard, where we're really trying to coordinate what they need and what they're asking of us. So we spend time doing all the boring paperwork, but we get to spend a lot of time working with students and parents and mothers and fathers around what's happening. And I think that's really the backbone of the way we've set up a lot of the coordination in Newport, is that we have a lot of people on the ground, a lot of faces in the community that are willing to sort of be part of the effort.
Let's give out the website so people can learn more, go to it, and maybe even get involved with the social media from the website too. So what is the website?
Absolutely. The website that we use is stopkidsdrinking.org.
What's on the website for people to go and see?
When you go to it and you open it up, there's a bunch of links on there that talk about all the federal programs that are going on. There's a lot of information for parents to use to talk to teens, but there's also some teen resources on there too. It's pretty much parent-oriented, but there's a lot of good information for any age group.
All right. Ben Elcom, the A coordinator for the Newport Substance Abuse Prevention Task Force. It was a pleasure having you back on the show, so thank you.
Thanks for having me.
We'll take a break and come back. I'm Sean Murphy. This is For the Record. Stay with us. Welcome back to For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. Segment 2 now, and in this segment, Laura Hosley. She's Director of Community Prevention for the Rhode Island Student Assistance Services. That's actually one of her titles because you have multiple roles. So first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Let's talk about what was the other thing, because you do so much, and we were talking off the air about, you know, one thing is sort of like a little 4-hour thing a week or something like that, but it has so much impact. But let's talk about your roles, your duties, and what you do.
Okay, well, my full-time job is working at Rhode Island Student Assistance Services, and I actually used to be a student assistance counselor. So I was in the middle school or the high school working with the students directly. But I ended up backing up into administration, so I oversee 2 of the grants with 2 different communities. And then my little part-time job, which is sometimes volunteer because they only have a certain amount of money, is coordinating the Jamestown Prevention Coalition. And I've been doing that for over 20 years.
Wow. So you feel, obviously, sometimes, and we talked about this too, you don't always see the end result of it, but the satisfaction you know in doing what you're doing, someone has to do it, and that's you, right?
That's true. And because I've stuck with it a long time, I think we've seen a lot of good things happen in Jamestown. Even the community theater started as a little pilot program, and it's been in existence a long time. We have a student assistance program in the school. There's a teen center. Even one of the latest things is a permanent prescription drug take-back depository in the police station, so people can just come in and drop off expired or unused medications. So when we think of things that might really benefit the community, or we hear of things that other communities are doing, then we hope to institute it in our own communities.
Always take the good ideas, the ones that work, and you may need to modify it a little bit for your community, but whatever works. And the thing is, things may be going great, new programs added, but one word of caution, just because things are going great doesn't mean that they can't go awry, and you kind of have to just keep an eye on it, right?
Right, and you really hope to sustain good things. So it isn't good if the coalition is what's driving the process. You hope that the partners take over and institutionalize it. Like the Teen Center in Jamestown is under the Recreation Department. It was an idea that we kind of began, but then when people really bought in, now it's something that all the kids can enjoy and hopefully will for years to come.
It's evolved, right?
Right.
And it's a source of keeping kids out of trouble, for a lack of a better expression to use, but that's one of the things. It's something that they enjoy doing, right?
Right, and there's adults present to supervise, to monitor, and even just to talk to kids.
You know, you said you've been involved for 20 years or so. What got you involved in the first place? What happened?
Well, actually, my first job out of college was working at a group home for people who had been discharged from the local mental institution. And I was there for 8 years, and I saw a lot of ties to substance abuse. These people were fun to work with, but they had really gone down a tough path. Some of them had been institutionalized for up to 30 years. And I think I really wanted to back up to see, how do you actually prevent a lot of these awful things from happening? And I started working with kids in middle schools and high schools, just looking at what were they having a tough time in their lives, and how could we help them not become derailed and really find paths to success.
What is happening in their lives? Is it usually a family thing, a parent thing? Is there a common denominator that's going on there?
I think there are some common denominators. It may be stress. It may be how they handle problems, what values have been transmitted from their parents. I think that's huge. Are they getting their information from their parents, or are they relying on their peers and the media? So then they have to make their decisions, and you know, there are plenty of substances available and people out there to tell them it's no big deal. So if it's easy for them, they may just go down that path. But if they've had, you know, an upbringing where they've really been listened to and had those values transmitted, then they probably won't go down that road.
Is peer pressure still the toughest thing to avoid?
It is, but I think it's very subtle. I think it's more like, hey, this is no big deal. You're going to enjoy it. And if there really isn't any reason for them not to do that, it's just easy for them to.
They have to have a sense of security and think that nothing bad will happen. Or, like you just said, the best way is, in kid vernacular, no big deal. It's
Right.
it's not even going to be that big a deal, so just go ahead.
If the kid can say, yeah, actually it isn't going to get me where I want to go, and that's not the kind of thing I do. I know my son said the first week of high school, someone came up to him at his locker and said, hey, you know, do you want to buy some weed? And he went to my daughter and said, you know, what do I do? And she said, you know, once you've established that you don't do these things,
They won't bother you anymore, right?
They'll leave you alone.
Right.
And that's the direction he took. And fortunately, you know, he had good leads to follow with his older siblings, so he didn't go down that road.
Is it mind-boggling, or are you at the point where it's not surprising that your son was approached in school, not outside, not around the block, but in school, to buy weed?
It's disturbing. It's
Yeah.
definitely disturbing. I'm fortunate, and it's unfortunate that I hear these things doing the work in that same school system. But you don't want to know that that's happening. I mean, in one sense, it's sad. But it's not just his school, it's happening everywhere. I don't think there's a place where kids are safe. That's why you have to really build the system within them that has them question. And one of the things that he's involved with, a program we have in Rhode Island, actually through Rhode Island Student Assistance, is Varsity Athletes Against Substance Abuse. And the kids actually have to apply. And in North Kingstown High School, it's gotten more and more popular each year. So they had to turn kids away this year.
No kidding. Well, you know something's a success when they can't accommodate everybody who wants to be involved.
Amazing.
So it's about sports then, right?
Yeah, and the athletes, they take a pledge that they're not going to be involved with substances, and then they go down to the middle schools and talk to the kids about why they don't do it. Because the middle school kids tend to think all high school kids do these things.
Right.
But if they know that they don't, and that they'll actually be cool if they don't do that,
Right.
then they have an easier time going in and saying, no, I don't do that stuff.
It was what Ben was talking about in the first segment. You get peers to talk about it and what they're doing. You know, the middle school kids will think that they're cool for not doing it. You know, if
Right.
they buy into it. Adult, like again, an adult telling you not to do something. You know, but if one of your, you know, an older kid who you kind of emulate a little bit, especially once you get into high school, if they're not doing it, then that's cool not to do it. Right?
Well, it's a culture.
Yeah.
And if you can establish that culture on a team or with a group of friends, however you can do it, that positive culture can really be the one that stands out.
You have a bit of personal satisfaction because was it your son that told you that one of his friends was directly influenced by just casual conversations that you would have with them in the car, right?
Well, I realized that a lot of my kids' friends never went down that road to abusing substances. And my son had said it's not a coincidence that they heard a lot of conversations in the car when we went places, and that helped them make a decision not to. And when I mentioned that to my older daughter, she said, you know, nobody ever knew what anybody else's mother did, but they all knew what you did, and they wouldn't want to disappoint you. And I was surprised because I knew that I had that influence on my kids, but I didn't know that spread to other kids. I felt good about that.
What kind of conversations when you're just driving along in the car are you having? Because it's not like you're browbeating them when you're there. It's more casual, right?
Well, it is, but my kids would often say to me, Mom, how did this conversation turn into one about drugs?
Oh yeah, right.
So, or they'd say, please, Mom, don't go down that road. But it's hard not to. If you're driving down the road and you see a place where their babysitter was killed in an accident where someone was driving who was drinking and she was a passenger. You pass that place on the road where she died, and I have to bring that up. And it just did seem to come up an awful lot because I do this work, and it's not only the work I do, but I think it's probably a mission in my life to help kids stay away from things that are going to hurt them and be as successful as they can.
As far as the work that you do and the community involvement, which is always necessary, one of the things that you try to do, but you can never have more or not enough community involvement as far as volunteers helping out. You're always looking for them, and right now you kind of feel like you don't have enough, right?
It's true. We have great community partners in Jamestown. It's very easy to work with the police or the school department or the recreation department, but as far as volunteers coming out to attend the meetings, we've really seen a decrease in attendance. And I am concerned about that, and I'm trying to bring that up to promote people just coming to meetings. It's either once a month or every other month, but just to have the discussion. We have great discussions when we have people there because people have all different perspectives. We have somebody who works in treatment, somebody who works at the prison, and most of the time people walk away saying, wow, I never knew that, I learned a lot. But to get people to come to the meetings is what we have a hard time. And I know people's lives are busy and there's lots of choices and they're driving their kids all around, but I still feel like if they would come and participate, it would help the community a great deal.
It's an investment in the child's future, right?
It is.
But what do you think What do you think the reason is for the decrease? You can talk about things going on in people's lives, but you don't not start teaching your kid to write at an early age because you want them to get ahead. So why wouldn't you attend this? Is it too esoteric for them, maybe?
I really don't know. I'm trying to do more outreach, and I want to meet with the ministers of the churches, and I just got something out in the newspaper. I'm thinking maybe people don't know. I think if they knew the value of just attending meetings, while they're raising their kids and really being aware of some of the latest trends and the culture, that it would help. So I don't know where that will go. I'm just trying to think positively.
Yeah, well, we're talking about it, so it's all about word of mouth, spreading the word, come to the meetings, and, it's beneficial for everybody involved. One of the things you talked about earlier when you were talking about writing grants and stuff, I always get into this with a lot of guests because of the economy and the way it is and the way it was. We were in a recession. Getting grants and getting financial help, has that been a task? Has it been difficult?
Very difficult. And a matter of fact, the coalitions are actually state mandated for every community, but yet we've been getting funding cuts, and we're at our lowest point now. And we keep advocating to not get these cuts, and I don't understand that either, because it does make us feel devalued. But we have to keep struggling. Having somebody who's coordinating a coalition that's only 4 hours a week is really extremely difficult to have that minimal time, especially when, as Ben said, there's a lot of paperwork. We have to do online reporting. We have to keep our certification up, which means taking a lot of trainings. You really can't do it in 4 hours a week. So the rest of my time is volunteer.
Can you be in the schools? Can you be out in the community? Can you be with the kids, the students? How much of that do you get to do, and is it enough as far as you're concerned?
I don't really do any of that. There are people, the student assistance counselor is 3 days in the middle school. We don't have a high school in Jamestown. We have a teen center. So I work through those people because I don't have the time. Unfortunately, that's what I love to do the most.
Right.
But I need to do the administrative part to keep these programs going.
What would you like to, it's always an evolving process, like we mentioned. What would you like to, what's the biggest change you'd like to see? What would you like to see evolve or come together? What's the next thing for you?
Well, I just think the community involvement. I would like to see a lot more people aware of what the issues are and how they can step in to help. So I actually have a student doing community service, and what I asked her to do is find out the dates and times of the next meetings of lots of community organizations, and on my own time, I'll go and do presentations and explain what the community organizations are like, the Prevention Coalition, and we have a nonprofit, Friends of Jamestown Youth, and why people should step up and get involved.
So you'll go to their meetings and introduce what you have, and maybe they can come to your meetings, right?
Right, and I even went to a church a couple of weeks ago that I had never been to before, just to get to know who they are before I speak to them and tell them who I am.
And do you have faith for the future? I mean, is there a light at the end of the tunnel?
I don't know. It's tough. This culture is very tough to work in. And with the change in policies and laws, we're seeing a lot of the kids thinking there are no problems with these drugs and that they can just go down these roads. So we really need to step up our work, but with fewer resources and fewer people participating, it makes it harder.
We are just about out of time, so I want to thank you for being on the show today and getting the word out. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Sean.
Laura Hosley, she's the Director of Community Prevention for the Rhode Island Student Assistance Services. Is that what it is?
Yes.
That's just one of them, right?
Right.
So you can watch this show and many others on our YouTube sites, but in the meantime, I'm Sean Murphy. We will see you next time. Take care.